What do you think Martin Luther King Jr. meant when he said the tranquilizing drug of gradualism?
Okay. Um, so I think he meant tranquilizing drug of gradualism. So we always kind of gradually slide into things. It's not ever boom, we're gonna do this. And so at this time when there was inequality, he's we need to move faster.
Yeah, I sort of thought that too. I looked up gradualism because I didn't know the meaning, and it meant to take gradual and small steps moving on. And tranquilizing means slowly dying off. And so Martin Luther King Jr. wants to tell the people and make sure that they'll be moving quickly and not gradually.
Yeah. Okay. So, when you looked at paragraph 21, how do you judge someone by the content of their character, and why is it so difficult?
I thought judging someone by the content of their character was to judge them by what's on the inside and not what's on the outside. And I think that's actually a super difficult thing to do because our brains are just set to just make quick inferences about people because we don't get to know their inside quick enough to judge them by it. And so we just quickly judge them by that. And that's how we decide if we want to judge them by the content of their character.
Yeah. I basically said the same thing. If I didn't know you, I'd look at you and I'd go. But yeah.
So why do you think Martin Luther King Jr. repeats himself so many times in his passions? When he says we can never be satisfied, or I have a dream.
Well, I have a dream. Today is such an influential statement, but then he was repeating himself because he had multiple dreams inside one dream, and he couldn't be satisfied until his dream came true.
Yeah, I'd say I agree with you because I think he was just trying to emphasize the points that he really wanted people to know while he was doing his speech.
Mm-hmm. So if Martin Luther King Jr. were alive today, do you think he would be satisfied with the progress we've made toward equality?
I think he'd be a lot happier with the progress we've made today as a country because we've achieved many of the goals that Martin Luther King hoped we'd achieve.
Yeah.
And we've achieved more freedom and equality. But I still think he'd feel a need to make it completely satisfied with just personal things, just personal judgments.
Yeah.
So how do you think Martin Luther King Jr. Used the history of the black people to make his speech more persuasive?
He put an emphasis on all the bad things that have come from that, so that people would understand this is what happened. I want to make this better.
I think especially in paragraph 3, when he's talking about 100 years later we're still not free. 100 years later we still haven't cashed this check.
Yeah.
And he just uses how mistreated they've been to spark up the hope that it can get better and it will get better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so now that we've brought up that, what similes, metaphors, figurative language did you find in the passage?
There was a ton of them in this passage.
Yeah.
Martin Luther King Jr. really used metaphors and similes a lot.
Mm-hmm.
He compared their freedom to a check, and he compared their past to a sweltering summer, and the unfairness to a cup of bitterness. And then, as you can see, he sets up his passage in a way where he's comparing, in the beginning, things to other bad things that need to be fixed, and then towards the end, he gets to what can happen. And he gets to how things can change and how everybody can be free.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So What do you think he's planning when he's saying this will be a great demonstration for freedom?
When he says the greatest demonstration of freedom in history. Okay. Well, obviously I thought he was going to talk about freedom, and I was like, well, yeah. And then I was researching, and in history too, we found out that he actually hadn't planned on sharing the I Have a Dream speech, and someone actually said, tell them about the dream.
Mm-hmm.
And so you weren't expecting that. You expected him to talk about freedom like the whole time.
When I was researching as well, I found that he was the last person to go, so he had seen everybody go before him, and everybody give impassioned speech, and he thought well, mine's not going to be this big. All these others were so amazing, but then when he went up, he knew that it was already such a great demonstration of freedom, and his goal was to make it an even more great demonstration of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think Martin Luther King Jr.'s experience as a preacher helped him with his speech?
Well, preachers do have to be good speakers and able to speak to people well and be that inspiring person who conveys the message. So he used that, and he did really well.
Mm-hmm. He used different elements that he would use as a preacher, and then he took them into the speech and applied them very directly right to the situation they're in, and talked about how they just need to be freed, and how he also used it to talk about how he wanted to fight the battle, that he didn't want to fight with huge amounts of violence. He wanted to fight it peacefully, and he wanted everybody to realize that they're all God's children.
Yeah.
What do you think was meant when Martin Luther King Jr. Said that the black people have a bad check that is marked insignificant funds?
I think he meant that there's even though they've been freed, they're still unequal, and people just don't think it's right to make them equal at the time.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, because he uses it in the beginning when he's talking about a check to say that every American has been given this money by the American history, which is the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. And so he uses that to say that when they were creating this country, they wanted everybody to have equal rights. And he uses that history of the Americans to make everyone understand that this is what their history wanted, and this is what they should make true.
Okay. Okay, so overall in this passage, what was your opinion of just your opinion of the passage, I guess?
I thought just the way Martin Luther King Jr. used a bunch of different elements of what was happening right now and what happened in the past, and just different comparisons, I think he really ended up making it very powerful.
Yeah, I basically said the same thing, yeah. It was definitely a very powerful speech with a combination of all those elements.
What does it mean when he says the whirlwinds of revolt continue to shake the foundations of our nation?
Well, at the time there had been a bunch of things, there was Rosa Parks and sit-ins at restaurants and stuff with African Americans, and so and that made other people angry and started to like divide again right after we were recovering from the Civil War.
I thought it meant like when I looked at whirlwinds, what a whirlwind does is it two opposite wind forces combine, and they're pushing against each other so hard that they start spinning. And so he's saying that these two opposite forces that shouldn't be opposite forces are pushing against each other too hard, causing this destructive whirlwinds that are shaking the foundations of America. And in the sentence right before it, he says, "There will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the Negro is granted his citizenship rights." And so he's saying these two forces will continue to spin around and destruct everything about our nation until the bright day of justice will emerge.